In therapy today, it occurred to me that I don't know how my one sister in particular perceives me and my experience alongside her in our childhood. She was kind of labeled the problematic child. She was always strong willed and outspoken, and she did not just watch injustices. She would say something if she thought something was wrong, and I was one to just try to go along and get along and keep the peace. And she makes jokes still to this day about how I was the good kid. And I guess it just occurred to me that I wonder if, from her perspective, I was just able to tolerate everything and that I was just okay with everything that she wasn't able to be okay with. Because externally, I wasn't making a fuss. I wasn't saying anything at all. Or honestly, if I was saying something, it was just whatever I thought was going to appease. Because I'm definitely prone to fawning and freezing more than anything else. I tried really hard to run from any conflict that was happening in the house. I tried to people please. And I wonder if somebody on the outside, her included, could just think that I was just okay. But I never was okay. Um, when I would freeze or dissociate or people please, I did my best to appear relatively calm, but that was because I thought I needed to in order to stay safe by not further upsetting the adults in the area. Inside, when people were fighting or I was being mistreated, it felt like a bomb was going off in my chest. And I just had to contain it in some sort of, you know, like impenetrable shelter within my chest. But it was really, really painful. And I think some of how that ended up building up in me is not anything that I've made obvious to my sister. I was self harming by the time I was about 7. And I know that she knows I was doing that in like high school, but I don't think she had any idea that it had started much, much younger than that and in a different form than it took at older ages. And while she knows that I have anxiety and that I had depression as a teenager, I don't I don't think that she knows how much of that is linked to our childhoods. That the example my therapist gave was that I had pretty severe social anxiety when I started therapy about 2 years ago. And at one point, I had said to my therapist that a lot of what I worry about when trying to make conversation with people is what the right thing to say is. And in that session, they, were asking me, what does that mean, the right thing to say? And what it really came down to was like, without fully realizing it, I had internalized that there was some magical correct thing to say all the time. And I didn't know what the magical right thing to say was. And so I felt like I didn't know how to talk to anybody. And that comes from spending a lot of time trying to appease people who cannot be appeased, trying to people please and manage the emotions of people who you can't emotionally regulate because you're not them. And I did well in school. I made friends. My teachers liked me, etc. Um, But it was painful. And I am really curious if my sister has put any of this together, or if she just thinks I was able to, quote unquote, behave well despite everything we went through. And she wasn't. And so maybe she, I don't know, might even blame herself for acting the ways that she did. When, from my perspective, I think it's pretty amazing that she was able to stay so courageous to keep speaking up when I wasn't. And while there are downsides to defaulting to a fight response for sure, um, there are big downsides to defaulting to fawning and freezing as well. Like, I'm 2 years into therapy and still working on reconnecting with healthy anger. I feel bad for people who are kind of labeled the difficult kid or the bad kid, because being judged for the way that you're coping just has to be so painful. Um, and yeah, I think I need to find some way to let my sister know that it's just sort of coincidence or luck or chance that I somehow got labeled as the easy kid, that coping with our trauma wasn't easy for me. It just kind of looked that way on the outside.